Welcome to the Torvus podcast. My name is Ari, and this is going to be episode 5. This is a continuation of the previous episode we did, which was talking about Star Trek. And I'm going to be joined by Jason once again, and we're going to delve deeper into the mythos of the Star Trek universe. So stay tuned and hold tight. Welcome back, Jason.
Good to be back here, Ari, for Star Trek. Torvus podcast
continues.
You knew I was going to do that.
I did. So if you had listened to our previous episode we did on Star Trek, we went on at length about an amazing web-based series called Star Trek Continues, which basically starts where the original series left off at about 3 years and continues their 5-year mission. So you should really check it out. Jason and I are huge fans of it.
Huge fans. There's a lot of other things that get done in Star Trek, and a lot of other things are very well promoted, but Star Trek Continues can always use a little bit more promotion because it's that good.
Yeah. It ran from 2013 to 2017 before they kind of got it's almost like a copyright thing infringement. It was something stupid like that, right?
Not exactly. You can look that stuff up. There's various problems with fan ones, but Star Trek Continues, everything's completely above board, really good, and they had no issues and stuff. The highest level of integrity. There's nothing bad you can say about Star Trek. Well, someone might be able to, but
it was good.
Just great respect for those.
Okay, so we're getting into this is part 2 of the kind of Star Trek universe, and you and I were talking prior to then Mike's coming on about influences of Star Trek.
Influences, like I was curious, like how you got. You're a little younger than me. How did you get started with Star Trek? Where did you first see Star Trek? What was your way of viewing Star Trek when you first started? And then how have you followed watching Star Trek over the years? And what influences has Star Trek had in your real life?
Well, I think that from most people, if you were not alive during the original episodes, then you saw it in reruns, just like we all did in syndication stuff. So the reruns. So in the late 70s, early 80s, on television, watching the original Star Trek, that's just what it was. Because it was always on, right?
Yeah, it was always on.
Like that and MASH.
I remember having it before cable TV came out.
Yeah.
For you younger people, there was a TV before cable, broadcast television, where we had an antenna to be able to get it. I only had 3 channels, 4 if you were like super lucky and had a really good day, you could get the 4th channel. But it was, for me, it was an after school ritual. It was part of the thing. There was just a host of shows. I don't remember exact order that they were on, but you had like, Beverly Hillbillies, Gilligan's Island, Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, Hogan's Heroes.
Just like a whole bunch of crazy shows. Get Smart, like a bunch of really good shows and stuff, but Star Trek was one of them that got in there, and Star Trek really did change my life.
Yeah, so I think that, you started watching because it's science fiction, and I was always a kid who liked science fiction and, going to new worlds and things like that, and exploration and imagination, that it just all feeds into what I am as a geek. And I think most geeks kind of are like, oh, awesome, it's new. And then when I was, how old was I? I think I was 10, and I had a birthday party. My 10th, it was 10. And I invited my friends over, and we used a VCR or video recorder, and we filmed.
These are things with tapes.
Yes, with tapes. It was
video tape.
It was a VHS recorder, and we taped a birthday movie, and it was called Star Trekkie.
Nice. Was this the same one you recorded, your famous ninja one, which will show up in a future episode?
That was different. That was actually done on Super 8. That was actually done on film, my dad's camera. So I have it downstairs, and I actually have a VCR and DVD player downstairs, which I'm going to hook up. So Star Trekkie is there.
I have not seen this. How have you not shown this to me?
And then a couple years later, we did Star Trekkie 2. And so they're on VHS. They're in a box downstairs. So I will show it one day. So anyway, we did this episode. It was all a parody, and it was hilarious. And that's how it influenced me as a young kid, because it was just imagination. It just fed into my need for otherworldly things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, Star Trek was a huge influence. It got me into science fiction. Star Trek and Star Wars together. But Star Wars will be a different podcast. Let's not try to cross too many things over here.
Yeah.
But it also got me into reading a lot more. It really, even though it's science fiction, is also an influence on fantasy as well. It also ironically got me into martial arts. I'd say Star Trek along with Stampede Wrestling. Shout out to people from Calgary.
Yeah. How did Star Trek get you into martial arts?
Because of cheesy fighting things within there.
Really?
One of the things that I actually remember is what I call Star Trek chick flip. And yes, I'm old enough to say chick, but it's like in the what's it called? The People of Vol or something, the one with the snake, snake idol and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the
volcano.
Yeah. And one of the red shirt. We haven't talked about red shirts yet, surprisingly. How did we go through a whole episode not mentioning red shirts?
Oh my God, we have to talk about that in a second. Okay.
Anyway, okay. In that episode, there's one of the red shirted female characters that grabs one of these, those weird guys that all kind of look the same by the arm and does flips them over and stuff. And it was really, really super cheesy. But it's like at the time, I'm like, how old am I? I'm like, what do they call pre-teenager, like kind of things?
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, that's like so cool, right? And then there's various things that Kirk does and stuff. But anyway, sometimes every now and then when I teach you martial arts, I'll do a Kirk martial arts kind of thing. So I do mention Star Trek chick flip. So.
I know. I remember the thing, and so when this is edited together, you're going to see the flip.
You can put the little thing together there. So it was one of the influences. When I decided that I was getting into martial arts, I was looking for martial arts that would appeal to me, and that was one of the early things that early on appealed to me.
So what you said?
We'll do another episode on martial arts,
but you're talking about Kirk. So if Kirk had a martial art, what was his martial art? And it wasn't Kirk-Fu. You're not allowed to say Kirk-Fu.
Okay, I was going to say Kirk-Fu. Yeah. And so one of the role-playing games I do is the hero system where you design your own stuff. Yeah. And you would design a martial art and you would call it Kirk-Fu and you would do all the different Kirk moves. It's Kirk. Like he's his own. He's not
It's kind of judo-ish.
He's got some judo-ish stuff, but he's also got some other stuff that, again, because I was also influenced by watching pro wrestling with my grandpa at the same period of time. And some of the stuff is kind of wrestling, like the double axe handle where he has all two hands together and smashes people. And he's got his famous, Kirk drop kick. That's very wrestling. Playing arcade video games at the time. There's one called Tag Team Wrestling. There was a Japanese name for it and other stuff. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but the version I played was Tag Team Wrestling, and there's a different thing where he jumps up and does a double kick to the chest and stuff, and then he's got the double Kirk chop and stuff. Comes up and people are grabbing him and drop and does a double. There's just a host of different ones that put your fingers in the little grate thing in the engineering,
and then you jump off and kick someone.
Or if you want to be able to defeat Khan, then you have to have that little thing that for whatever reason in engineering was just there that pulled out. Sorry, I did that thing on police baton stuff.
And
every time I do the police baton training thing, then I always think of that little plastic thing.
Hojitsu.
Anyway, but so it influenced me into getting into martial arts. Not immediately, but it was an early influence. It got me into role-playing games, science fiction, fantasy, computers. Computers have become a big part of my life too.
Right.
That would have not happened without Star Trek.
It's kind of ironic, like just talking about the martial art thing for a second and Star Trek and science fiction. There's a ton of geeks out there that are dangerous motherfuckers. Yeah. You wouldn't know. Like you think, we go through high school and the geeks are picked on, or you're a loner or whatever it is. And, the different groups as you're growing up in high school, right? But, fast forward 35 years later and, you're a 4th degree black belt, right? So it's weird.
Yeah.
But it's very cool because I think that martial arts and geekdom go hand in hand. All the black belts that I know are geeks.
Yeah, it's the jocks did not make the black belts as much as the geeks did.
Yeah.
At least from that era. Maybe things are different now. I don't know.
But I think of all the people, all my contemporaries, all the guys and gals that are in their 40s and early 50s now, that they're all into Marvel, they're all into comics, they're into science fiction, they're into Star Trek. There really is a theme that runs throughout.
Yeah.
So
Well, no, you think about it like here we're sitting here together. We're both into both of these. Alex from earlier episodes.
Yep.
Another great guy, also martial arts. Like but it has a thing. But this episode is not about martial arts, so I don't want to, I can go on tangents and get into Herodotus some other time. But if you get that reference, then you're there with me.
Right. Well, so I mean, yeah, it influenced us as young kids, obviously, and here we are today. So,
Yeah.
so
But
Matt,
the influences have gone on throughout life. It's like
Yep.
there's been a complete refreshing, and that's one of the things is when new Star Treks come out, they each speak to a different. They talk about Star Trek: The Next Generation is a series, but
Yep.
but each iteration of Star Trek is for another generation. People
Of
talk
course.
about Generation X, Generation Millennials, blah blah, all this kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
each Star Trek, I speak a lot about the original Star Trek because that's what I first started with Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
People that are a little bit younger may have started with The Next Generation. People now, Discovery,
right?
maybe just getting into Star Trek now. Maybe Star Trek's a new thing for you and you're just getting into it with Discovery or Orville, which isn't officially Star Trek, but
Right.
it's Star Trek. Come on.
Okay, so let's kind of jump to what we were just talking about previously. You mentioned talking about the red shirts.
Red shirts.
Okay, so there's an ongoing thing. You obviously know what I'm about to say if you are a Star Trek fan. And the joke is, in the original series, if you were wearing a red shirt when they beamed down to the planet, those dudes didn't have names and they would always die. Those were the guys that would die. The
So
red shirts.
awesome. Speaking about things that I've almost bought but haven't bought, there was a really cool online somewhere. There was like a Star Trek red shirt and it had a bunch of like burn marks and cuts and stuff on it that you could get. And like, of course, only other Star Trek fans are going to get it. And they've kind of moved away from that in the later ones. But yeah, it's uniforms. That's
Totally.
a discussion point of but the red shirts, yeah.
If you see other geeks out there and they're wearing a T-shirt or something like that, Jason, that's really obscure, there's that nod.
Oh yeah. Not only is there that nod,
Yeah.
but well, whatever. I'm not doing that job anymore. When I was a bouncer,
Yeah.
I've let people in for having like cool geek stuff. It's like, forget the line, dude. Come on in. Like, and honestly, it doesn't come up that much because your geek people in the bar crossover isn't that much. So,
Right.
But I'm recognizing you guys for sure.
Yeah, and it happens like it could be like a symbol.
Or a nod sometimes when you're just going by and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, it's usually T-shirts.
T-shirts, yeah.
That's
Just
usually
makes
the
you feel
thing.
good. Yeah.
I sometimes run into it though. Someone will mention something like in the grocery store or whatever
Yeah.
like that, and it's like I got that reference.
Sometimes the nod, you're just like, you're there. Before I was like one of the last people that ever got a cell phone.
Yes.
One of the reasons I was one of the last people.
I have no idea.
I was waiting for a phone that was a flip phone that went when you opened it up. That was, but
and now they have it. Just
and-
the sound effects.
Yeah, so that's how much of a Star Trek person I am.
Okay. Yeah. So there's that geek that you share that thing with other people.
Yeah.
So Jason we were talking also, he has a very special skill set and he coined the phrase, which I think is absolutely hilarious. So Jason is a decathlon geek, and a decathlon geek, he's jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, I'm not the best runner. I'm not the best lifter. I'm not the best jumper.
But you
best
know
swimmer.
a lot of shit about a lot of things.
Yeah, there's better Star Trek people than me for sure. But I do appreciate it because it's awesome.
So one of the, I'm going to kind of throw a quiz out there to the listening audiences. There's so many different characters that have appeared on Star Trek over the years in different episodes and in different series. I'm curious to know what your top 5 characters are for Star Trek, because there's so many. And now what Jason and I have also been talking about is there's so many amazing secondary characters.
I would make it more interesting because we covered in the first episode, I believe we covered we ranked our captains from
Yes.
1 to 5 of the ones that you have seen.
Yeah.
But I think there's some other characters in Star Trek that are really good that deserve some attention too. We can't get just completely lost on the captains. As
Right.
important
So
as they are.
let's go into the realm of the amazing secondary characters that Star Trek has revealed to us.
Okay. Well, for me, everyone's at, oh, here he goes again on original series and Star Trek continues. I've got some for them. But Next Generation, one of the best secondary characters was, well, it's not Next Generation, but Deep Space Nine was Garrick. I thought Garrick the Tailor.
Garrick was awesome. Garrick
He was a secondary character.
He was a
but
Cardassian.
I would have to say he's my favorite character from that series, and I like that series, but he's my favorite character.
And so Garrick was he formerly an assassin for the Cardassians.
The Obsidian Order.
Yeah, Obsidian Order, and
it's been long enough. You can go with spoilers.
There's lots of spoilers.
You haven't seen it yet? Wow.
And so over that series lifetime, they kind of went into more detail about his history. But every time they had Garrick on, I'm like, oh, I totally want. This is a great episode because they would reveal little tidbits, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, they definitely gave you breadcrumbs and fed you there. It wasn't all at once. Yeah.
But who doesn't love the mild manner dude? Alien that happens to be a killer
that becomes things, and you didn't know life. That was a good series in some ways because they did have that. I think you mentioned before the guy at the bar or whatever his name was, and he. Do you want to talk about that? I don't want to steal your thunder here.
No, you can for sure.
There's a guy at the bar that just sat there.
Yeah, Morn.
And they have these reoccurring characters that are really. That some of them they go somewhere with them and do something really cool like Garrick, and others they don't really go anywhere, but they're still there, and you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so Morn, he was awesome. So he sat at Cork's bar and just sat there, and he never spoke or anything like that, and he just drank. And they went into kind of I think it was the very last episode, but he ended up drinking, he stored latinum in his second stomach, and that's why he said he lost all his hair. And one time he regurgitated it. I don't know if you remember that episode.
I don't remember this.
So basically, Quark wanted it, and he regurgitates some latinum, and latinum is the a currency in the Star Trek universe. And anyway, so very cool. And so I really like Morn, even though he never said anything, and they didn't do anything with his character other than that. So
yeah, and each thing had their characters that were in there that reoccurred, and they weren't in every episode. They just came back sometimes, and. That made things really cool.
One of my favorite secondary characters, which they were going to do a spin-off from the original series, was Agent 7. And that was the episode with Terry Garr.
Cat guy.
And he had a cat. There was
she was a cat.
Well, it turned into it was a woman at one point.
So 60s.
Yeah, it was so 60s, wasn't it? So that was really cool because he was a time traveler. And also from a different part of the galaxy, and he intercepts the Enterprise coming to Earth, and
you can totally see Star Trek, Man from Uncle crossover kind of thing, UFO, all that kind of.
Yeah,
great. There's some really great '60s shows. They're very different. Star Trek's not the only good '60s show, but
yeah. So the Agent 7, awesome. Really liked it. You had mentioned earlier another one that you really liked was Harry Mudd.
Harry Mudd, Harcourt Benton Mudd. See. This is the weird thing about me is I do not remember, there's people I know in the real world, and I know them fairly well. I don't know their names, but characters from something that I watched in 1981, I still remember. So there you go.
Yeah, Harry Mudd was great. So there are a lot of great secondary characters. And again, I'm throwing it out there. Who are your favorite secondary characters from Star Trek?
Yeah, please comment on that. There's so many good ones. I realize most of you haven't seen Star Trek Continues, and again, being one of my favorites, there's some really good characters in there. They have a counselor. I know Next Generation had Deanna Troi in there, but they have a character in the Next Generation, which is her precursor. That's a really good character, and again, most of you haven't seen. There's some spoilers, but they do some great stuff with them. So maybe I'll talk about it in a later episode after you guys have had a chance to absorb the awesomeness that is Star Trek Continues.
And one that we really must touch upon, which started everything off as a secondary character, is number one.
Number one. Oh.
So explain
totally
who number
amazing.
one is.
So
everyone thinks it's Riker.
Everyone thinks it's Riker, and put in the comments if you're one of the people that didn't think it was Riker. Most people think, okay, Captain Kirk, that's his series, and yes, it is. However, there's another captain in the original series, Captain Christopher Pike. Now, those of you who are up on Discovery may have a different view on that, but that's where he comes from, is the original series. And he had his first officer. It's sort of like a pilot version of Star Trek, the original series, before it was the original series, but episodes being in...
It was a pilot.
Yeah. And there's the Cage and the Menagerie and those episodes. but his first officer, number one, was a woman. And okay, now back then that was a big deal. That's another thing we should talk about with Star Trek. Things that they did that really changed things. They were ahead of the social curve.
Totally.
That's one of the things that makes Star Trek Star Trek. And she's a great character. And I'm not a celebrity guy, but even I notice that she appears in other versions of Star Trek. The look up. Anyway, number one was really cool, having a woman first officer there. That was where they had the shouty Spock.
Yeah, the emotional Spock.
Well, he wasn't really emotional, but he was shouty. He talked really loud. I think it was kind of like they were trying to have like some sort of military bridge yelling orders and stuff.
Right.
I don't know exactly what it was. What Spock's deal was with the shouting in those few episodes.
Yeah. So number one, that is correct. So it's not Nurse Chapel. It is Nurse Chapel because it's Majel Barrett who plays Nurse Chapel as well. So she's played lots of different characters. So she was number one. She was the first officer. And then when they actually turned on the original series and passed the pilot, then she became Nurse Chapel.
And a computer voice.
And then she became the computer voice in Next Generation.
The Next Generation.
And then she also became Deanna Troy's mother, Luxon Troy.
Yeah.
So,
So she's like a minor thing, but she's a major influence too. And then who knows what other influence she's had on Star Trek.
Right.
Because, with relationship with Roddenberry, and she outlived him too. So who knows what kind of, there's people who know, but I'm not that much of I'm not that deep into it to know what influence she's had, but it's definitely, she deserves mention.
But one of the things that Star Trek did, as you had mentioned, and this is no secret, is they crossed all these political and racial boundaries, and they touched upon subjects which were, a lot of taboo at the time, but they masked it in science fiction.
They totally, and they didn't just mask, but they were daring for their time. That was one of the things. The original Star Trek, for its time, is just so far ahead of the social curve that it's, I don't know, like you take Uhura, Chekhov, like you got to remember, like, okay, Chekhov doesn't get mentioned a lot, but this is the height of the Cold War.
And they got this
like
Russian
when
guy.
Russians were actually communists, not like the stuff now, but we're not going to get political, but that was a big deal, having a Russian on an American TV show as a major character. And he was sort of in some ways Spock's apprentice, and it was good. He even made it into a major role in the Wrath of Khan, best Star Trek movie ever.
Yeah.
And he had a major role in there. And Uhura, like, talk about, you've got women power, racial thing.
Yeah.
The kiss. Like,
yeah, I mean,
not just within Star Trek, but within TV, period, like big culture. Like that is huge. And that's one of the things that makes Star Trek stand out. So you can go into.
Yeah. So that was the first interracial kiss on television. It was, Captain Kirk and Uhura, and they have that kiss. So originally it was supposed to be between Spock and Uhura, but Captain Kirk.
Yeah, I did not know that.
William
You're
Shatner,
a trivia master.
William Shatner wanted to be the guy because he is
because he's Kirk and he wants the girls.
Apparently they had to practice that scene lots. He wanted to practice lots. So that was the first one, right? But again, breaking all those boundaries. And originally, if you look at Spock he was supposed to have red skin. And but the network said, no, we can't have someone who's got pointed ears and has red skin. He looks too much like the devil. Big no for 1960s television.
Right, Christians, yes.
Right, so they kind of went around that. And to be honest, the only reason that Star Trek ended up getting on the air was because of Lucille Ball.
Yes.
Desilu Productions. Desi Arnaz, Lucille Ball, it was her production company that produced it. And she was like, no, give him a chance. And we're going to back it. So that's really pretty fascinating that most people don't know.
Super cool. I've heard that mentioned. Yeah.
But you're right. Like, so again, science fiction always kind of pushing the boundaries.
And it's not just that we talked before about communicators and stuff. It's a technological boundaries because it's science fiction. We're like, okay, science. Yeah. But social boundaries, that's part of what makes Star Trek. It's not just a science fiction show. It's something that's guided people's lives and have spoke to a larger bit of society. And yeah.
Do you remember the episode where they go down to the planet and it's run by the gangsters?
Oh, yeah. A piece of the action.
See, he remembers the things.
Yeah. I don't know, I lost my memory at a certain point, but things before that point in time, I remember some of them.
Yeah.
That was one of the ones. And,
Yeah.
They had some of those episodes that were.
They did a few of them that were
so
kind of
good.
like that. So you had that,
Yeah.
and then you had the one where they continued on with, it was like the midget guy, and they had telepathy or telekinesis because they based it off the Roman. Do you remember that episode?
There's a Roman one, yeah.
Yeah. So they had that,
And they had the guy that lived that had been around since, I believe it was Babylonians, that he had been something from Methuselah.
Oh yes, and then he had his daughter that was an android.
Yeah.
And then
robots we can talk about, but we mentioned Harry Mudd, like robots, androids, like, and the influence on there, like Austin Powers, the fembots would not exist without Harry Mudd and his androids from the original series.
So I'm going to see if your memory works here. Ready? Data's creator. What's his name? Go.
Data's creator. I don't remember his name, but he's Doctor something.
Doctor.
But his evil twin brother was Lore.
Yes, Dr. Noonien Soong.
Noonien Soong.
Yeah. It's weird what's trapped inside this gray matter.
Yeah, you got the memory in the.
Well, you do too.
Giving Monster Manual stuff is a different thing, but that's a different story.
So the different kinds of robots and androids that they've done too. It's pretty cool. So again, Star Trek, lots of different themes that they've had that again have been
war, and we took interracial kiss and stuff, but war themes again in the late 60s. I don't remember the name of the episode, but they had a planet that it wasn't really at war. They just disintegrated people, like it was an ongoing war, and they.
Oh yes, they didn't want the actual violence. So
they didn't want the actual violence.
It was all on computer, and then you're like, you had to go to the chamber.
It was like a lotto kind of thing.
Yes, that was very much like Logan's Run, and it reminded me of that. But yeah. And
good short story, The Lotto. One of the few good things from English class. Anyway,
that was a good one. Not all the episodes, but a lot of them.
Not all of them. There's some bad ones, but we're trying to be positive. At least I'm trying to be more positive than I have been sometimes.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get into Dane's Dungeon.
Dane's Dungeon.
Okay.
Dungeon.
So Dane's Dungeon, we talk about what's cool shit and bullshit in the particular genre we're talking about. And we're going to go back and forth between Jason and I.
All right.
And we're going to mention. So I'm going to mention a name, and I want you to say cool shit or bullshit. And I'm going to say the same thing. And then you can come up with something. We'll go back and forth. So it's just kind of a banter back and forth of what we think was cool or not. So we may agree or we may disagree.
Okay. Tangents, man.
So here we go. We're going to go into Dane's Dungeon. And in this part, we're going to talk on two things. We're going to talk about movies, the motion pictures, and then we're going to go into deaths.
Deaths, yes.
Okay. So let's start with the movies.
All right.
So let's start with Star Trek, the original motion picture.
I thought it was cool shit. I know that in the things later on when you look back and you go, okay, well, that's not the best movie, but at the time when it came out, it was the only movie. And being a Star Trek fan, and you're like, okay, this is like more of the thing that I already love. And they had some good continuations and stuff in it. I'm petty, so I like little things, like they had the captain, the Matt Decker, right? And there was in the original series there was Commodore.
We're going to talk about that in a second, though.
Okay, sorry, but anyway, and then the Klingon thing at the beginning with the 3 Klingon ships and stuff. Like, I mean, there's cool parts to it. Like as the overall movie, maybe it doesn't stand up. But I mean, at the time, I remember when I saw it, I was like, wow, that was cool. So now it's not the one that I'm going to go back to and watch first. Sorry. But at the time, my overall opinion coming out of it was cool shit.
Okay. And I'm going to say bullshit on my end, just for all the obvious reasons.
Did you see it first, or did you see something else before you saw it?
Did I see it first? That's a good question.
Did you see it before you saw Wrath of Khan?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably did. But just, I thought they kind of muddled it and they just used too many special effects and I wasn't really a fan of the story. It was,
okay.
I thought it was shitty. So,
all right, we don't have to agree on everything.
No. Okay.
You're allowed to be wrong. It's okay.
That's okay. The next, number 2, The Wrath of Khan.
absolute total cool shit. Best movie of any Star Trek movie ever made. Period, hands down, and a good movie in its own right. If we were going into an '80s episode, which we should do sometime, still one of the best '80s movies.
So Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, 1982. I would also say cool shit in the extreme. There's nothing wrong with that movie. I really liked.
No, that is. And speaking about Star Trek-isms, I think a lot of the time here, again, doing martial arts, I do several different martial arts, but one of the martial arts is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I often say that I have a complex with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because most of the martial arts I do are stand-up, and when they're in the nebula there.
Yeah.
And
the Mutara Nebula?
The nebula, yeah. And they're in there, and part of the reason that they're able to defeat Khan is because he has 2D thinking, and they use 3D thinking to be able to defeat him.
Yes.
And whenever I'm doing the ground stuff, I mean, I'm okay, but, other people are a lot better, and I'm always thinking that, damn it, I'm like Khan, that I'm being beaten because I use 2D thinking. That's how this bastard tapped me out this one time.
Got it.
Every time we roll, it comes up. Right?
Interesting, yeah. Okay, so then we go to 1984. There was Star Trek 3, which was the Search for Spock. And so I'm going to throw that one out there and say that was a bullshit movie. I didn't really like it. How about you?
I would say it had some good parts, but overall I would agree. Bullshit. And when we get into the character death things, that I think the main thing that I think is bullshit is because it undermines the sacrifice and the death. That's the main thing for me that makes it. Well, it's not that it's not got good things to it, but
well, having said that, because when Spock dies in the Wrath of Khan, there was no plan to bring him back.
Yeah.
However, Paramount came back and said, we need to bring him back because this is a huge moneymaker.
Because it's a moneymaker. And that's, to me, what makes it a bullshit decision. Like, for me, it's when you get decisions that are made for money's sake rather than for the love of the thing. And I love Spock, but I'm saying that isn't one of the things about how you die is at least important as how you live or something like that. Right. That might even be from that movie. But that's the thing is if you take away the death, then it cheapens the life by taking away the death.
And then we move on to, after that, it was Star Trek 4, which came out in 86, which was the Voyage Home. That's the Voyage Home, yes, with the whales.
Yeah, so it was like a humorous one. So I would say, I enjoyed it, but it was bullshit because it was like Star Trek light. It didn't quite hit all the things. The really good Star Treks are able to put comedy along with something really serious and pull it off, but it didn't have the balance of a really good Star Trek thing. It was funny and light, but it didn't have the gravitas that a true Star Trek thing
So cool shit or bullshit?
Bullshit.
Okay, and I'm going to agree with you. There's parts of it that I liked.
Oh, totally parts
I
liked too.
I say bullshit too. Which brings us to
it was an episode worthy thing, not a movie, not movie worthy.
So then we will jump on to probably one of the worst movies in my opinion, which was The Final Frontier, number 5.
Bullshit.
Bullshit.
Straight, flat out bullshit. Didn't even deserve to be an episode, let alone a movie. And if your whole point was to do Star Trek deals with God, look to Who Mourns for Adonis. Yes, Greek god, but does a better job. Then look to Star Trek Continues, Pilgrim of Eternity for the follow-up. Again, like I was saying in the first episode of this, was what makes really good Star Trek. If you can call back something earlier and do a good job with it, then that is. If you want to see how Star Trek deals with gods, watch Who Mourns for Adonis, the original series, and then watch Pilgrim of Eternity on YouTube. Star Trek Continues. That's how Star Trek deals with gods.
I agree. So that was a 1989 Final Frontier where they try to go to the center of the universe. Shockery, as they call it. Not a big fan. And then that leaves us with the last in the original series, which was The Undiscovered Country. What do you think?
I'm going to go meh.
That's not an option.
Meh.
Dane would not allow you to say meh. Dane would say, was it cool or was it bull?
I'm going to say it was bull because overall I wasn't impressed. It was okay, but I expect more from Star Trek. Star Trek has to be above that, and so it doesn't hit the cool barrier. Maybe my expectations are too high, but so I'll make it bullshit just because Star Trek deserves better.
So the one thing about the Undiscovered Country, which came out in 91, it was kind of a bridging episode because you could see that the technology had increased in such a way. The Klingons had, they were kind of more developed, and it was interesting. It had a different feel. It was not that the baton was passing yet, but you could see it there. I would also
it's like it's kind of half baked. It's like I can see kind of where you're going, but you didn't quite do enough.
So I would say also, now thinking about it, I'd say bullshit on that one. And then we get into the Next Generation. So the torch gets passed in 1994 with Star Trek Generations, where Picard and Kirk are together. What do you think?
I mean, okay, whatever. I'm going to say bullshit because it's a thing to cross them over and do it. And, I can't say that I have like, oh, I remember this. This was a really great thing about this that was totally awesome. So I don't have anything that really sticks out to me as being like, oh, this was great. You kind of threw them together, and I like Kirk and I like Picard, but it's like, okay, it's like a crossover. It's like comic crossovers just to cross them over.
But for me, so I would.
You could have done a better job with it.
Yeah, you could.
It's not that it doesn't have good parts and stuff like that. But again, I set my bar high for things. If it's not better than an episode, why is it a fucking movie?
Good point. So you're making me change my opinion now. So you know what? I'm going to still say cool shit because it was the first time that Kirk is sharing the screen with Picard,
which is cool.
So I'm going to say all the story was like, meh. Malcolm, McDowell was on it, but meh. I'm going to say cool shit for that one. We're going through the movies, but now we're going to talk about deaths in Star Trek as a cool shit bullshit in Dane's Dungeon here.
Okay, how about best deaths, worst death? And then we can go to other deaths.
Well, what do you, best deaths or worst deaths?
Yeah.
But we're just talking about the deaths in Star Trek, so it won't matter.
It's your show, man. Best.
Well,
deaths.
you can say it's the best death.
Okay.
If I say that and you're like, that was the best death, that's fine. Okay. So one of the first deaths we're going to talk about in Dane's Dungeon here is Tasha Yar.
Tasha Yar.
Bullshit or cool shit?
Utter bullshit. Worst death in Star Trek. It was utterly meaningless. However, it does have a cool shit side to it because one of the best episodes of The Next Generation was called Yesterday's Enterprise, where they had her back and we were talking before about minor characters that do some things, come back sometimes. With Guinan actually got to do something interesting there in that episode, and mentioned about Yar how when she found out she died a worthless death in the other universe.
Yep.
That it was good for her in this parallel thing. So that one turned it around. It's too bad they didn't do more with that, but the tar creature thing, definitely a really, really useless death.
So I disagree with you. And
Okay.
I know that they redeemed themselves by saying it was a useless death and stuff, but I found that the way they killed it was just a swipe of his hand and she died. I like that because they're always going out on top. They're always doing something, there's the sacrifice, but it's just to show in a blink of an eye, you're dead. And I never really liked Tasha Yar's character anyway to begin with, but
Apparently neither did she. Otherwise she wouldn't have quit, right?
that's true. So I'm going to say that I thought that was as deaths go, I'm going to give it a cool shit. That was good because it wasn't glorious.
Okay, I see where you're going with that, but I don't think it gave the sense that anybody can die at any time. After that, you weren't kind of like, it didn't carry on. It was episodic where, okay, she died, but it never ramped up the tension for the other characters.
Yeah.
Where you thought, okay, well, Yar died. This next thing that could happen to some other character wouldn't die. And that's maybe another thing we should talk about is like tension in Star Trek. But being able to ride that edge where you're like, oh my God, something could happen. I don't think that had a continue. I see what you're saying, but I just don't think that it continued past her. They didn't let the echoes go there where you were like, do you remember the next episode or whatever it was like, oh my God, something could happen to this character, this main character could go, anyone could go. I don't have that recollection. I could be wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So, how about Spock?
Spock's death was great. Again, part of what made Wrath of Khan so good. He sacrificed, needs of the many, the needs of the few, needs of the one, all that. And then I just mentioned about like how you die is at least important as how you live. Yeah. And that was like a good, really heroic death. And then we got into the Kobayashi Maru thing, and that was...
Well, we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay, but that was that was, again, it was a no-win situation, and that was kind of his solution to the Kobayashi Maru in a way. It was sort of Spock going in there and being able to save the ship by sacrificing himself. So, and that's a very Star Trek kind of value, if you will, is being that like the sacrifice for the good of the many.
So I say that Spock's death was also cool shit.
That's
one of the
cool
best deaths.
Like if you're looking for things that define Star Trek, that's up there.
Yeah. How about Kirk's death?
Yeah, he could do better.
Bullshit. Yeah, I say bullshit as well. He ends up getting blasted off a gangway, and he falls down and gets crushed, and he dies.
It's not even that even cinematically, it's not even that cool of a death, let alone purpose and all the rest of the things.
But you would wonder, that William Shatner would have something to do with his death, that he wouldn't be like, this is the way I'm going out.
Again, maybe you should watch Star Trek Continues, where it treads the shadow, and see something in that episode that'll give you a better version of things.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It wasn't.
But that's the thing, is like deaths done right is a thing, and it's more writing. Like, this is the things, like actors get a lot of credit, directors get a lot of credit, and they should. But writing is super important too, whether it's obviously in fiction, but in movies and TV, writers don't get enough credit. How many actors make so many millions of dollars, and the writers don't get the same thing? The writers, if you have bad writing, good acting ain't going to save bad writing. The writing is a foundation everything else is built on.
Now, it's funny because Kirk's his dying words in there, initially it was fun. However, his actual last words, which William Shatner put in, which I thought was really awesome, it was technically, he said the last words were, "Oh my." And I remember he's there and he's just, because it wanted to have some sense of wonder. And it's actually been said that William Shatner he's really afraid of death.
Oh.
And so that was kind of a big thing for him. So, but "oh my" was his last words. But anyway,
but not as good as Khan's death.
No.
Kirk's death has to be better than Khan's death.
Yeah, but I mean, that's how they did it. That's why it's bullshit. The last death here. This is going to be a really obscure one.
All right.
And this is talking about Commodore Decker. From an episode from the original series.
Doomsday device or machine or something like that.
Right. And so kind of cool shit or bullshit, first of all?
Cool shit.
Okay.
And talking about tension, like all the Star Treks are good in their own way, but the original series has the best way of ramping up tension. Like the pace is slower in the 60s, but still they somehow manage to make things more tense. You're always more worried that something's going to happen to them when you're watching it. And that's a good tension one that he's got the.
So if you what we're referring to is basically in the original series, he jumps in a shuttlecraft. He's kind of this Commodore who's got some psychological problems, but he sacrifices himself by entering the mouth of this doomsday device, and it blows up. And I always remember him just showing him, and he's sweating, right? It was always sweating, right? I don't know what it is about that.
But again, that part of the thing added to the tension. Like, how many other times did they show stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and I can hear the music.
Yeah, and you're really big on music. That's another thing. It's like, and part of that made the tension is the original series had such good music. Like, I notice it, and I'm not a music guy like you are, but they just managed to hit that. The music and the lighting and all that stuff. Another reason Star Trek Continues is so good, because they nail it.
They do. Oh my goodness.
To be able to do that stuff where you really felt like, oh my God, and not in the cheesy horror movie way where like, oh my God, there's a thing going to jump out and get them. Well, I mean, sometimes, but they really had that, and that was a good death. Like sacrificing it's sacrificing for the good of all.
Yeah.
That service, the selfless service and sacrifice.
So that's kind of our Dane's Dungeon, cool shit, bullshit of different movies and characters' deaths in the Star Trek series, and which kind of leads me to deaths and situations and no-win situations. The Kobayashi Maru. So the Kobayashi Maru is a very famous simulation which is done.
What movie is that in?
What, the original Kobayashi Maru?
Yeah.
Well, Star Trek 2.
Oh, the best movie.
Yeah.
A good thing from the best movie. Okay, go on.
So the Kobayashi Maru basically is a test for captains to see if they can, how they react in a no-win situation. And they're put into simulation, and basically it's a distress signal from the Kobayashi Maru, and then they have to go save them, and then the enemy shows up, and people die, and the starship dies, and so. But Kobayashi Maru, the only person to ever complete and successfully win against the Kobayashi no-win situation was Captain James T.
Kirk. Because?
Why? What did he do?
He cheated.
It's not very captain-like, is it, Jason?
Or is it?
Well, I don't know. So,
well, I think that's the thing. Is there's times when.
Do you believe in no-win situations?
Yeah, my life. Yes, I do believe in those no-win situations. But the good thing is that there's a heroicness that in the face of the impossible, you fight on anyway.
Right.
And sometimes cheating is the way to do it. Now, we're used to a certain type of hero, but there's other models for hero, right? Like you take your Odysseus hero versus your Ajax hero. I don't want to get too classical on this kind of thing. And the lying, cheating, deceiving kind of thing, your Lokis versus your Thors. You're like there's a place in the universe for that, being tough and fighting and brave and courageous isn't the only way to be heroic. Sometimes that little trickery, and Kirk does a lot of trickery. It's not just that. Like, how many times did he lie? There's that one with the stupid headed alien, the Corberite device or whatever. I can't never say that thing, and how many times does he lie about the things that we have with Khan? How does he beat Khan, right? He does it by trickery, deception, lies. I mean, that's part of Kirk's character. So I don't think it's out of character. That's part of what makes him there. Is he's got that Odyssean hero with that deception and trickery. He's a cunning hero as well. He's not just sit there and beat everyone up because he's tougher than them and charge in with the bravery. He is brave, but there's that great quote which they talk about: guile and cunning will usually win over youth and exuberance. Right. And that's kind of a Kirk thing. But yeah, he reprograms the Kobayashi Maru program so he can win. Yeah, but I'm saying that's not out of character for him. That is part of who Kirk is. It's a defining feature of Kirk, is having that cheating, that's not a fair fight kind of thing. Like, I mean, right? You want to go to the Mirror universe. Why is Kirk the captain? Is it because he plays fair?
No, because he cheats. Yeah, that's very, very true.
Right?
Well, I don't know.
We talked about androids and stuff before with Harry Mudd. He does his talking to people, and he cheats them. He breaks the rules in order to do things. He doesn't always. It's a way that you can't win against a thing, and so you find a way to go outside what it is to be able to beat them. Right? If you were a vampire, wooden stakes and stuff is cheating, right?
Right. Well, I strongly suggest the listening audience, if you haven't revisited watching the original series or the Next Generation or any of the other series, which are they're all on Netflix right now.
Not all of them.
Most of them are.
Yeah. Well, depending what region you're in because of legal.
Well, no, the original series is on it.
Yeah, but Next Generation's not.
Yes, it is.
At least when I looked the other day.
No, it is. It's been on forever. Okay. Yeah, Next Generation's on there, and they're all on there except obviously Discovery. But revisit it, watch it, because there's a lot of themes and a lot of really cool stuff on there. But Jason, there's a ton of stuff for Star Trek. I appreciate you coming down, chatting again.
Maybe we'll touch on this again, because there's like so much.
There is
so much more that we could do with Star Trek. But check out all the different stuff. One thing I wanted to say is all the Star Treks are good in their own way, and they speak to different people. If I happen to have certain favorites, that's like I started with the original series, and so therefore I find it to be really speaks to me the most. And then Star Trek Continues is so good because of the original series. Other people might have started with other things that they're good, and some of these new ones, I don't want to do spoilers for Ari who hasn't seen them. Discovery's got some good parts that call back also to the original one.
Cool.
And there's non-Star Trek things. The Orville is not Star Trek, but it's Star Trek. There's lots of good things. Check out all the Star Treks. Find out what you like. I'm going to be myself going back and giving a second chance to some of the other ones that I didn't really appreciate the first time. Maybe I'll appreciate them more. And what makes a really good show, whether it's Star Trek or anything else, is replay value. If you can rewatch things, books you can reread, whatever geek or non-geek things that you can redo again and again, that's the best mark of if something's good. How many times have you watched it? How many times have you read something? That's what makes it good. And the reason I've mentioned some of these old things as much is because those are the ones I've rewatched way more times than any human should.
Well, appreciate you tuning into the Torvus podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or queries, please comment below in the video, and we'll do our best to answer. If you're looking for any future episodes, we're always down to talk about anything in the 80s, movies, monsters, mayhem, motivation, martial arts. That's kind of the theme of the Torvus podcast. And you can always check us out. We have an Instagram page, which is the Torvus_podcast, which you can check out kind of neat memes and other video clips that we put on there. So thanks again, Jason. Really appreciate it, man.
Okay, well, thanks for having me here and putting up with my rambling.
Anytime. Okay, until next time, live long and
prosper.